Hi friends, thanks for joining. Today we're going to be covering customs clearance. So if you're deciding whether to expand your market and start shipping globally, this is a good opportunity for you to learn a bit more about customs clearance. Or maybe you're already shipping overseas, but you're not sure exactly what the paperwork means, so I'll go ahead and give you a bit more clarity on that today. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Donovan. I'm an e-commerce entrepreneur specializing in globalization. My previous experience is in demand planning for customers as large as Apple, and I've also done my own e-commerce fulfillment warehouse, shipping over 10,000 orders per day here in Singapore. So our goal here with My House to Warehouse is to grow your e-commerce business from your house or garage, and give you the capabilities and confidence to grow and run your own warehouse, or successfully manage a 3PL to do that for you. Let's go ahead and jump into today's topic. We're going to be talking about customs clearance and what you need to know to go global. Now, don't miss the next lesson. Join the My House to Warehouse Training Academy down in the description. We have a group there to support e-commerce entrepreneurs like yourself to successfully run their warehouse operations. Every week we have a live stream coming from Singapore at 10 a.m. That's available on the US on Wednesday night. Now, our agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about customs, duties, and taxes, what those are, how they work, what documents are necessary. You're probably filling some of these out already in the past. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about what each component means, give you a bit more clarity, and who pays. Now, customs and duties need to be paid, taxes need to be paid. Who is responsible for that? We'll talk about what is required, and then leveling up your business. So if you've already been shipping overseas, we'll give you some tips on how to continually improve your customer experience. So, customs purpose. Customs is a defense on the border of a country for the goods coming in. The idea is to protect it. Now, also they need to apply duties and tariffs. Now, tariffs are kind of like taxes coming in onto goods coming into the country. So the idea is to raise the price of the good by applying a tariff to it to allow the same products within the country that are produced within the country to have a bit of a competitive advantage in terms of price. So usually it's commodities. It could be equipment like automobiles. To protect the domestic market, you want your foreign automobiles to be a bit more expensive. So that's what duties and tariffs are. Customs is going to be making sure that all those duties are paid. Now, they also restrict imports. There are some items that the country doesn't want to have brought into the border. They are banned. So a lot of times this is going to be weapons, it's going to be drugs. The transport of these items across the border is restricted. So customs is supposed to stop that from happening. They also enforce quotas. Make sure that if there's any items that have a quota, that goods that are coming in above that quota are rejected. And also to make sure excise taxes are being applied to any luxury items. Something like cigarettes, alcohol are a good example of excise taxes. All right, so there is a concept called duty-free. You may have heard of this in the airport. It's basically a amount set by the government that anything you bring in that's below this amount does not require duties, just because it's too much of a hassle to do the paperwork for everything that comes across the border. So there's a duty-free amount. So there's a certain amount that you're allowed to bring across the border of dutiable items that have a duty applied to them, that tariff, but they don't need to be paid because it's such a small value. So it applies to certain below a certain value. No need for a customs agent to take a look at it. No need for a broker, and no payment required of that duty. But do note that the banned items are still not allowed to be brought in. Customs will still be looking out for those items if you are trying to bring those in. Also, your documents must be correct. There still needs to be a proper document. You need to declare with customs, even if your value is less. But be sure to use the proper disclosed value. Now, if you want to check the duty-free amount for that, you can go to the World Customs Organization. The link is down in the description to go ahead and take a look. They break it by region, so you can get to the customs website for each country. A lot of times that customs website is going to be in the local language, so you can do a quick Google search, see if you get a hit on what the duty-free value to import into that country is. See if your goods will be below that. You can also check on the UPS, FedEx, DHL website. Those carriers will allow you to have a quote. You can see how much is applied to the shipping charges, how much is applied to duties based on the value of the item. Now, import and export licenses, there is some cases where the goods are controlled. The government wants to make sure that they have an idea of who is doing the transactions so they can later trace. Also doing export as well as import. So take a look at your good requires this. Now, there's actually an example I have where the license was not in order. Here in Singapore, which is with the HSA, the Health Science Authority, I had a client that wanted to bring in shipment of cosmetics. They were a bit slow on getting their license completed, and the goods actually got held up in customs. So definitely spend some time, do your research on your product, make sure that you have all the clearances and licenses necessary to bring those goods in. Otherwise, the customs will hold your products. Now, a customs broker, this is somebody that's going to be working with the customs agents. Agents are the officers that are protecting the border, inspecting the goods. The broker is someone that is working with the client, represents the client, and is licensed. So they have a good idea, they know what's going on with the procedures. Think of them as a lawyer representing you in a court. You can't represent yourself, but it's always a good idea to have someone that knows what's going on, have a lawyer with you. So in this case, if you're having to go through customs, have a broker with you to help guide you through. Some countries you can represent yourself, but it's a good idea to have a good broker to help you out in times of need. Now, sometimes they are required in certain countries if it's above the duty-free amount. In this cases, their fees will be quite inexpensive. Definitely take advantage of their service. And also, do note that there's cases in countries where you can be above the duty-free amount for small goods, but still be below the amount for large shipments. So large shipments have a different treatment sometimes than the small parcel shipments. Large shipments will have a higher duty-free amount, but if your parcel that's coming in is still under the duty-free amount for the bulk shipment, sometimes you can just get an agent to help you out, clear it as a bulk shipment amount, have an easy clearance. You just need to pay the duty on that and hopefully have a smooth clearance. Now, do note if your shipment amount is over even the bulk shipment threshold, that it does have to formally clear customs. So do be aware of that. There may be cases where you cannot use duty-free. And cases where you might need a customs agent, even if you're small. If you're importing into a country with a very low duty-free amount, it's easily gone over. I think Canada is equivalent of like 15 or 20 US dollars. So it's quite easy to reach that threshold with something small. So you may need an agent for countries like that. Also in the case if you're shipping expensive items. So it can be quite easy if your items are very expensive. One unit can easily get you over the duty-free amount for the importing country. So you may want to have an agent on hand if you're having that case. Another example is if you have multiple items listed on your site, you have like a marketplace or something like that, it's very easy for the customer to order multiple items. Their total value of their order can increase quite quickly. So in this case, their value will go over that duty-free threshold, and you may need an agent at that point. Now, same thing if you get merchant orders. They want to resell in their country. They'll usually place an order for a large quantity. You can see those come in. Very easy to tell. It'll be 10, 20 units at one time. Those shipments may need customs clearance and the help of an agent or a broker. Now, where to find a customs agent? I do want to emphasize that it's a good idea to search ahead of time before you're needed. A lot of times the agent that's appointed to you, if you have a customs issue, the broker will be quite expensive for their fees as they're trying to get you out as quickly as possible with your stuck shipment. You can search Customs Brokers Association. There is an International Custom Broker Association. You can also search for local ones in the country that you're importing to. But you can also reach out to freight forwarders. A lot of times they'll have these people in-house already, the customs brokers, to deal with their customer shipments. They can bring you in as well to help with you. If they don't have them in-house, a lot of times they have one or two that they're quite familiar with working with. They can give you a reference, so you can have some good support for customs brokers if you need it. Now, custom brokers are quite necessary at times. The reason why I have a giant sequoia tree here is that my customer was actually selling them online on their marketplace, and they didn't know that a customer had ordered and actually shipped it into Singapore. So my company was importing the goods and doing the last mile delivery for these overseas shipments. Surprisingly, the customer ordered this giant sequoia and tried to bring it into Singapore. Well, the thing is they're not allowed. It's one of the prohibited items. Rightly so, because they grow quite large. They destroy property as they grow, so they held up the shipment. Now, the shipment they were trying to clear had 20 or 30 other customers' orders on it that needed to be delivered. So we were in quite a jam. Luckily, our customs broker was able to help us out, help us go through the process to remove that one order from the whole shipment and process through the remaining orders so that our clients can get the parcels that they needed. So have a good customs broker. They can be a lifesaver if somebody orders something banned, like a giant sequoia. Also, a suggestion for you, have a guide. For this lesson, we're covering suggestions out of the export-import procedures and documentation. The link for that is down in the description, so if you want to pick that up, it's an affiliate link. I'll get a small commission if you purchase through that. They suggest some quite important points that I want to emphasize, that any arbitrary or fictitious value is going to have a problem. So don't use arbitrary values, don't use fictitious values. A lot of times people will suggest to just put $1 for the value of the item. It'll be easy to clear customs. That won't necessarily be the case. You might get in some trouble with that. So I suggest not doing that if you can avoid it. It will just cause you problems in the future. Now, poor record keeping is also something that you should avoid. You have to keep the records for 5 years, the documents. I recommend keeping it together with the shipping invoices. So if you have shipping invoices that are coming in from your freight forwarder or your courier, just go and put those documents together with everything so it's easy to reference. And do note that customs can fine up to $10,000 per missing document. Now, for your small shipper online, don't worry about this. Do keep good records. Do declare the correct value, but they're not going to be going after you. They're going after those people that are, trying to import things wrongly. They need those teeth there to make sure that they don't take advantage of their situation on importing large values of goods. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the tax and duty calculation. It's important to know how it's calculated, because later we're going to be talking about how the payment is divided between the purchaser and the seller. All right, so tax, it can be sales tax or VAT depending on where you're at. VAT is just value added tax, so it only taxes the value added amount, so the difference between the purchase price and the selling price. Now, in both cases, sales tax or VAT, the sales tax will be kind of the most important, the selling price, and you'll apply that tax rate on wherever you're at, either the state in the United States that you're working with or the country that's applying the VAT. You apply that tax rate to the price to get the tax calculation required. Now, a lot of times importing, the client will need to pay for their own taxes, so they won't be able to receive delivery of the shipment until tax is paid. Right? Now, same thing with duties. Duties also must be paid before the customer can receive their order. To calculate duties, you have to first start with a harmonized code. Now, harmonized code is just a sequence of numbers to help categorize products. So each number will correspond to a different description. You can go and take a look online. It's quite easy to understand, but there's over 5,000 different products listed, It's really there to make it easier for customs to do their job, to see what kind of product is being imported, make sure it's correct, and that duties are taken on that. So look for harmonized codes, look for harmonized numbers. It's what's going to be determinant of your duty amount. Now, once you know that your product that you're importing, what harmonized code is under, you can find your duty amount. Next, you need to determine your sale price. Now, sale price for normal sellers online is just going to be the sale price, whatever price that the purchaser paid. In cases where it's something that's going to require extra labor to pick or pack, for example, the good that you're shipping to them needs to have a crate built. That crate is not actually dutiable. So the labor that goes into it, the cost of building the crate, that's something separate from the purchase price of the dutiable item itself. So it can be separated, but a lot of cases it's not going to be something that most people need to consider. But determine the sale price. After you know that, then you apply your duty rate to the sales price. You have your duty calculation complete. Now, do know that there are apps in the marketplace to put on your payment gateway to help customers out with that. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Alright, so the required documents to clear through importing to a country are going to be the certificate of origin, the commercial invoice, and an envelope pouch. Now, what do I mean? So this envelope pouch is just a clear plastic envelope that you see a lot of times. Don't worry if you don't have a clear plastic envelope, it's okay. Just make sure the documents are on the outside of the parcel so the customs agents can grab them. We'll talk about the documents here coming up. We'll start with certificate of origin. Now, this is mostly for free trade agreements. So your certificate of origin is going to make sure the good was manufactured in a certain country. So, for example, you have the free trade agreement between Canada, US, and Mexico, NAFTA. The certificate of origin is very important. If a good was manufactured in Mexico, shipping into Canada, they want to have a proper certificate of origin to make sure that there's no duties on that item being shipped between those two countries. But if the item is coming from China, maybe there is a duty against it. So with a certificate of origin, they'll realize that yes, there is a duty. When it comes into, say, the United States, that the duty needs to be applied to those goods. So the certificate of origin is very important when you're shipping between countries with a free trade agreement. NAFTA for the North America, EU has their own free trade agreement for member nations. Also in Southeast Asia, there's ASEAN group of countries. They have free trade agreements with a lot of other countries, China, Australia. So take advantage of those if you're in those regions. You won't be paying duties, but do remember taxes. Also, I want to talk about marking laws. Now, as a requirement, a lot of times for the country of manufacture to be posted on the item itself. So you've probably seen the Made in China label on a lot of products that you own. That's a marking law. It may not be the same as a certificate of origin. Sometimes you need both the certificate and the marking, and sometimes that one can be replacement of the other. So do go to check the country that you're importing into. Another thing to note is the 35% rule. So if you're taking raw material and building something with it, creating something, if 35% of the value was added to it in that country, then it's considered manufactured in that country. So maybe you're selling on Etsy, you're making your own handmade goods. It's going to be handmade in the country of your residence if you add more than 35% of the value of the raw materials to that finished good. Now, if you end up needing an actual certified certificate of origin, you can go to your local Chamber of Commerce. And also there's an example down in the description if you want to take a look at what a certificate of origin looks like for your use. Basically, the Chamber of Commerce is going to take a look at your purchasing documents, so bring those along with you, and they'll certify that yes, okay, they purchased the goods in this country, invoices from there, and they can generally confirm that it's the correct origin country. Now, the next document that you need is a commercial invoice. Now, I'll say commercial invoice times 3 because the customs process does require at least 3 copies to be included on the outside of your carton. The main components are going to be the buyer's information, the seller's information. So for both, include the name, business, address, and phone number. And then include the purchasing date. If it's within a week or so of the customs clearance date, Otherwise, use the shipping date on documents. And then we have the intercompany terms, the Incoterms. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, so hang on for that. You also want to have the currency. So just make sure that the currency is stated. It may be obvious, but there shouldn't be any confusion. There are cases where the client uses a currency that's not even the same as the buyer or the seller country. So just make sure it's clear. Put the currency on the commercial invoice. Another item that you might want to consider is having the invoice or the PO number on your commercial invoice as well. It helps tying back to the billing invoice, the other shipping documents for record keeping purposes. And then there are some countries that require other information on the commercial invoice. Definitely check in on that, but this is going to be your 99% requirement that we're talking about here. Now for the goods, there's quite a few requirements. They have to be broken out by each individual item and have a proper description. Because remember, we talked about the customs agent wants to identify the harmonized code for your good, make sure that they apply the proper duty. So they're going to do that using the description that you provide on your commercial invoice and making sure that matches the goods that you're actually importing. So here we have the men's shorts. I include the material, the 98% cotton, 2% elastic, to help them better identify what class of goods that it belongs to. So do the same thing with your goods. Have a good description in there. Include the country of origin, where it's manufactured. If you're imported it from overseas, make sure that you have the manufacturing country, not just the country that you last imported it from. So if you imported it from China, but maybe it was made in Vietnam, make sure that you put Vietnam, not the last country that you imported from, but from the country that was actually manufactured in. Another one that's required is the price per unit, the number of quantity ordered, and then the total for each item. So make sure you include the total amount, one line for every item, sum everything together on a total, and then you'll have your commercial invoice. So if you would like to have an example of that, you can go ahead and check down in the description. It's available for you there. Also, intercompany terms, Incoterms. As you probably heard me say a few times, Incoterms stand for intercompany terms. It's the trade agreement between the two parties making the purchase and the sale. It basically it defines where the ownership transfers in the transportation process. So as soon as it leaves the warehouse, does the buyer still own it? Or does it not pass to the buyer until it delivers to their doorstep? Also the cost. Who's going to pay for the shipping cost? Who's going to pay for the duties? This is all determined by the Incoterms. There's 11 different Incoterms you can take a look at. Today, for the purposes of e-commerce, we're really just going to take a look at two. The first one is DAP, meaning delivered at place. Now, that means when the duties are paid by the buyer. So it's delivered, but the duties are not paid. The buyer has to make sure that those are paid first before they can receive delivery. The second is DDP, means delivered, duties paid. Now it means duties are paid by the seller. Usually that means that on the website when the customer ordered, they already got an upfront idea of what their duties were and paid those before the seller sent those out. So these are the Incoterms that you would put on your commercial invoice when you're shipping out. If your client is going to be paying the duties themselves, go ahead and put DAP on there. If you're going to be taking the information from the customer ahead of time, there's no duties, you can pay the taxes ahead of time for them, you can put DDP. Now it's also a good idea to consider the best customer experience here. You want to try and use DDP. We'll talk about how to make that happen in overseas shipments at the end. Now, I just want to review first. We have our easy documents. These are going to be pretty much necessary for all overseas shipments. That's the commercial invoice, guaranteed needed, and the certificate of origin. Most of the time, you're going to need that as well. Those are going to be required for all shipments. But do know that there is a less than duty-free amount. So if you're below that duty-free amount, you won't actually have to pay duties. Do look out for free trade agreements within your region. There's a good chance that the goods that you're importing will not have duty if it's in a nearby country or in a trading block. So look out for that. Now, above duty-free amount, there's a good chance that you're going to need an agent if you have a high-value item. So go and look ahead of time. Make sure you get that agent before you get into trouble. And if your item needs a license, it's always good to do some research ahead of time. Get a feel for the market. What are the requirements? What are the licensing? Also, good idea to take a look at the sales tax requirements. Make sure that the sales tax or VAT can be picked up and transferred to the necessary government. And know your Incoterms. Try and use DDP, the duty paid for your customer. Have good customer experience. If not, DAP to get it to their door. Now, leveling up. Apps in the payment gateway. So we talked a bit about having to pay taxes, having to pay duties, and to do that, we need to be able to pay the government their duties and their taxes. So if you're doing business within the United States, you know that the states need to collect their state tax. So if you have a web store already, you're probably already collecting that state tax, passing it on to the government either monthly or quarterly. There's an app to help you out with that. Something similar is going to be for e-commerce. So if you have your country is collecting taxes already, the VAT or the sales tax, in between countries, there's going to be that same thing. The destination country is going to want to collect the sales tax for that good that's coming in. You can set up just register an entity. It's not even really an entity, it's just registering a tax ID number for the shipments that are coming into the country. They'll be under that tax ID number. You would just transfer the tax amount, same as your home country, your home state, over to that government monthly or quarterly, depending on the number of shipments that come in. So take a look at that. They can really help out the customer experience if you're able to take an app to help you out with the duties and the taxes. So stay tuned. We're going to be doing some reviews of those apps coming up soon. So look out for that. The next way I want to suggest to you leveling up your e-commerce business is to have a warehouse in the country that you're going to be doing business in. It really helps out. It avoids a lot of hassles with customs, taxes. There can be a fixed fee to clear customs. So if you're doing a one order by one order customs clearance, those fixed fees can eat into your costs a lot. So if you're able to import one large shipment of a few dozen or a few hundred units, it really spreads that fixed cost of clearing customs out among more units, allows you to be more profitable. If you have any questions on this is what My House to Warehouse is geared around, is helping you expand your e-commerce business either locally or globally. I'm based here in Singapore, going to help you grow in Asia. So definitely give me a buzz down in the comments or contact me personally. We'll go ahead and get that business expanded for you. So thank you so much for joining us today. Now go global. You're ready to go. And join us in the next lesson in the My House to Warehouse Training Academy. We're here to help you out every Thursday at 10 a.m. We're here in Singapore. Watch us in the U.S. on Wednesday evenings. Thank you so much for joining. If you're looking to expand your warehousing for your e-commerce, take a look at My House to Warehouse. We'll go ahead and get you set up. Every week we'll be here. And thank you so much for joining us. Take care. We'll see you next week.